Hello, my name is Milo. I've been a GMAT and GRE teacher at Kaplan for the last 14 years. Today, I would like to share some of my experience on how to achieve the score you wish to achieve. The most important step, and the first step, is to make a realistic plan. A lot of my students fail to achieve the scores that they wish to achieve because they did not make a realistic plan to begin with. Frequently, they will show up with only a few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, or sometimes even less, before they plan to take the test. You need to give yourself sufficient time and to actually study and achieve the score you wish to achieve. The first step is knowing your target. This requires you to do research into the universities you wish to apply to. For example, recently I had a group of students who were all going to Colorado School of Mines. For the program that they were looking to apply for, it has a minimum score of 154 for the quantitative section. However, the actual average score for the school and the program they're applying for was a 163. So if they their target score was the minimum requirement, they probably would have a low chance of being accepted. So a realistic target for them should be, and for you in general, should be about the average or maybe slightly above the average score of the universities you are applying to. Next, you need to know your starting point. This is another mistake I see a lot of students make, is that they don't want to take an initial test. They feel like they're not ready for the test, and so they won't take a practice test or any form of test because it makes them feel less capable. However, without knowing where your starting point is and what your weaknesses are, you can't make a proper plan on how to achieve your target. The first thing you do when you start to prepare and when you start trying to make your plan, after knowing your target score, will be to take a practice test and see where you're at. That will let you know how much of a gap you will need to make up, and that will allow you to start planning. Okay, give yourself enough time to study. This cannot be emphasized enough. You likely will not go from a lower score of, let's say, 145 on the quantitative to a 160 or 165 on the quantitative in a month. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but it's extremely rare. Also, you need to understand that you can't cram for a standardized test in the same way that you would cram for a test at university. And the standardized test, the subject matter is quite broad. What that means is that you need to give yourself time to study throughout a prolonged period of time, rather than just cramming everything in within a few days or a couple of weeks. Ideally, you shouldn't plan to study more than 2 to 4 hours a day. From my experience, very few students can actually commit to doing more than that, and those who do tend not to benefit as much from it as they ideally would. So once you know how many hours of study you need, you can basically take that time, divide it in half, and that's about how many days of additional study you will need. My experience is quantitative, each additional point of quantitative will take about 8 to 10 hours of study. Each additional point in verbal will take about 10 to 12 hours of study. If you are flexible on where you get your gains, you can roughly estimate about 10 hours per point of increase that you need. So let's say your target score is a 165 on your quant and a 160 on your verbal. So you need to get a 325. And let's say your combined score right now is 290. That means you can expect to be putting in about 350 hours of study to achieve your score. That also means a realistic study plan should be giving you roughly about 6 months for that large of an improvement. While it is achievable, you will need to put in the effort to achieve it. The biggest difficulty with the time also is actually dedicating the time necessary to do it. That means committing on a regular basis to studying for the GRE. Okay, once you know where you're at and where you need to go, next, you need to know the test. You need to know the material that's on the test, as well as the structure and mechanics of the test. Knowing your weaknesses. A common mistake that I know that I see my students making is they try to avoid doing the subjects that they're not good at. They want to focus on the stuff that they feel confident in. However, that's the complete opposite approach of what you need to do. Because the test is adaptive and will have a variety of difficulty of questions at different types, ultimately, you need to be able to do fairly well, at least in all of the subjects, to be able to get the higher value sections, higher value questions on the second section. Geometry. I highly recommend that you put a lot of emphasis on geometry. Whether you're good at it or not, I recommend you focus heavily on geometry until you can reliably get these questions correct. The reason why is that geometry is the easiest section on the quantitative to improve your score. Geometry is mainly about knowing the formulas and recognizing how to apply them and when they apply. Geometry can usually be mastered in about 15 to 20 hours for most students. Combinations, permutations, probability, those type of questions are kind of the opposite of geometry. A lot of students tend to focus on these subjects because they think that they are extremely difficult and so that they need to master them because they keep getting them wrong. Unfortunately, my experience with combinations and probability is that a lot of it is about your ability to visualize the scenario and extrapolate a pattern from the question. And this tends to come intuitively for most people who are good at it. What it also means is that if you're not already good at it, you will find these questions to be quite difficult, and there's not much will change after the initial few hours. Putting in a few hours of studying on combinations and probability is worthwhile to get down the basic concepts. But at the higher difficulty, it tends to be you see it intuitively or you don't. And spending a lot of time studying combinations of probability doesn't have an efficient return on your time. It is better to focus on other subjects and do these question types last. Vocabulary is another subject that a lot of people do not study correctly. I know a lot of books and websites will give you lists of vocabulary that you need to study. Now, if you encounter vocabulary you don't know, you should know it. You should make notes of vocab that you don't know. However, you should not be studying word lists directly. Word lists are incredibly time inefficient. Instead, you want to be studying word groups, and you want to be studying your root words. For example, if you look at the word pathos, if you don't already know the word pathos, at least you think you don't, you probably actually do, you just don't recognize that you know it. For example, the words sympathy, or empathy, or pathetic, they all have the word path in it. That's from the root word of pathos, which is sympathy or compassion. There are a lot of the words in English, if you use Latin, Greek, and even sometimes Spanish or Germanic root words. So knowing the frequently used root words can teach you large numbers of words in a short period of time. Okay. Another thing that, another mistake I see a lot of my students make is when they're doing the studying, they focus on specific topics and don't just do general practice. And you should mix that in. My general recommendation is about 60% of your study time should be focused on a specific subject you're having difficulty with. For example, you could be focusing on these synonym questions, right? Or the critical reasoning questions. Let's say you have difficulty with weakening questions, so you do a lot of weakening questions. However, the other 40% of your time should just be general practice. One of the best forms of general practice is a practice test. So try to mix practice tests into your schedule, into your scheduled studying time. Okay. There are 3 general ways of studying. The most frequently used one will be self-study. If you are a self-motivated person, self-study can be quite efficacious. However, a lot of students have difficulty with staying motivated when they're studying by themselves. Studying in groups or in classes can be quite beneficial for that reason. Also, you need to be aware of your own and honest with yourself. A lot of students make a schedule that if they stopped and were honest with themselves, that they would know they would never be able to commit to. Don't plan on studying 4 hours a day, every day, if you're not actually going to do that. And this comes down to self-awareness. Okay, material. There is a lot of material for the GRE. I believe I've done pretty much everything that's out there by now. For the course structure and methodology, I do like Kaplan probably the best. For the official guides, I think the official guides are very good to get comfortable with the style of the wording, the word choice, and the question structure. Be careful of online resources. Online resources can be great because they are free, which is always nice. However, online resources are also often developed by just random people, and it's especially on the critical reasoning question types. Sometimes the reasoning that they employ isn't accurate. It isn't sound. And if you train yourself to answer those questions, you're effectively training yourself in bad logic. So when you go to try to take the actual test, you will find that the question logic on the actual test may be quite a bit different than the logic you were training yourself on with the online free material. Okay, GRE preparation courses. One of the biggest advantage of a GRE preparation course is simple motivation. From my experience, you tend to socialize more with the other students, and you tend to encourage each other. A lot of my students will make study groups for outside of the class. They will make WhatsApp groups where they chat with each other, ask each other questions, stuff like that. My students in my preparation and my group preparation courses tend to take the test more than my students who studied in other methods, simply because they have more encouragement to take it. Another advantage of a GRE preparation course is the teachers. We have a lot of experience teaching the course. As I said myself, I've been teaching it for 14 years for GMAT, GRE, SAT, and other standardized tests. So we can share some of the experience that we have and also help to recognize where you're having difficulty and how you can best improve your scores. Another advantage of it is that it's structured. That can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. One of the disadvantages, and probably the main disadvantage of a large course, of a group course, is that you don't get as much individualized attention, but you will tend to get more class hours. Overall, personalized instruction, though, will probably be less than in a private course. These courses are not cheap, but they are definitely cheaper than the private courses. Then there are the GRE private courses. GRE private courses have a few main benefits. Motivation tends to be quite strong because you have personal interaction with the teacher. But I do find that the motivation from the group classes actually tends to be a bit stronger. But one of the advantages also of the private classes is because you get more individualized attention. Your score improvement and the completion of the course tends to be more compact. So you tend to be able to finish the course in about half the time. And that also means the motivation does not need to last quite as long for you to actually achieve your score. Again, you have experienced teachers, and the course is structured. The cost of these tend to be a lot higher than the group classes, but these are, again, more focused, more individualized, and more time efficient. Also, since they are more individualized, the teacher is often able to identify your particular issues more clearly and help you address your particular issues more. In the end, what you need to do to properly prepare for the GRE is know the test, know yourself, make a proper plan, and then study the material. Well, good luck for everybody out there who's studying